kind of is kind of like my road with cancer. So your darkest times lead you to your brightest ones. So I decided for Rosie to tell her perspective of her living on the streets in California and how hard it was for her. At the same time that I was in New Jersey, she was in California, both going through our darkest times in life. And only when we met each other did we realize that your toughest roads can lead you to your brightest ones.
This is the M Squared podcast featuring author Miranda Mathis. You will hear tips, tricks, and inspirations that will help you raise and educate little ones who are happy, safe, and kind. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to the M Squared Books podcast. I'm Sarah, the producer, and joining me as always is the fabulous Miranda Mathis. We're also joined today by Lori Skala. Hi, ladies. How you doing? I'm so glad we could record this conversation today.
I'm well. Lori, I'm so happy to have you.
I am so happy to be here.
Good. So, Lori, we're really glad you're here. You know, it's taken us a little time to get this going, but here we are. So everyone listen in today because this is a special one. Lori is an author, a teacher, a cancer survivor, and she's harnessed the power of pain and adversity and turned it into something truly beautiful and beneficial for both cancer patients and rescue pups all over. So I'm really happy to have you here to talk about this. But if you can, before we get started, could you just tell people who you are and what you do in just about 30 seconds, if you can?
Absolutely. Thank you again so much for having me and let me share my message and my story. I'm a school teacher for almost 30 years, 10-year breast cancer survivor. My husband is a 3-year colon cancer survivor. I lost my first dog, Jasper Jacks, to cancer. And I just want to give back to the community because I had so much help during my struggle with cancer. I just want to give back. So I wrote a book and a children's book, and I wrote it from my dog's perspective. And I donate all of my proceeds to animal rescue and cancer research.
Amazing.
Thanks
so much for coming on. And Miranda, take it away.
Well, I'm so happy to have you here, Lori. We met at a book event, and it was a wonderful experience then. And I'm so happy that you're here with me today. So I just want you to share with the M Squared audience and tell us about your experience with cancer and why you call yourself the Cancer Thriver.
Oh, I love that. Thanks, Miranda. I have to say, too, from writing this book, I have met so many angels, women who have lost their, people have lost their children through cancer, and just all these people that do these amazing things, such as yourself here with me today. I call myself a cancer thriver because it's part of who I am and my personality, that I will never let anything get me down. I'm always looking at the positive and what I could do. And I feel like through having cancer, when I was first diagnosed, my friend said, this happened for a reason. I know you don't want to hear that right now, but it happened for a reason and you're going to do something with this. And it was true. Had I not had cancer, I would have never gotten Rosie, and I would never be on the road to doing what I'm doing now, which is giving back. I just had so much help throughout my experience. And I just want to give back to people that maybe don't have as much help as I did, or, guide them in the right direction of where to go and things to do and how you can get help and things like that.
Well, I think being here and sharing your experience is giving a lot of people hope. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about Rosie. Is that okay?
Oh, please. She's a star of the show.
Good. Rosie, I heard that she was adopted. So can you talk us through thinking about adopting her and what the experience was like? And also, please share how she impacted your life.
Oh, I could go on for hours. Okay. So during my cancer battle, I was watching a television show where a gentleman in California would go to rescues and animal shelters, and he would rescue these dogs and train them and give them to homes. Because a lot of people feel like with the rescue dog, you're not sure, what are you getting? What was their life prior to meeting you and things like that. So people are a bit hesitant. So right before I was diagnosed with cancer, my first dog, Jasper Jacks, was actually diagnosed with cancer about 5 days after I was. his diagnosis actually hitting me harder than my own. And he only lasted about 2 more weeks before he passed. So I went through it with my cat, can't forget Kita, and she was right there, but there was always something missing. So I ended up with the show and I wrote into the show and they ended up writing me back and, we Zoomed and I did an interview and they flew me out to California and picked Rosie for me. And he trained her to be a therapy dog because my main goal was how am I going to give back? What am I going to do? So we met and we definitely had a connection. So she was not, we were on a TV show. We ended up being filmed in California on the TV show. But she wasn't able to become a therapy dog yet because you had to have her for a certain amount of time and go through the training. So she came back to New Jersey with me. She was trained as a therapy dog, and I would take her to my oncology's office and places where she would sit on the patient's lap. Exactly what I wanted to do was my dream. And they would forget that they were sick because she was on her lap and I would talk to them. And it was just amazing to see, you always get happy when you see a dog. If you're driving down the road and you see a dog, I do this in my presentations, they make you happy. And so she did. And then I took her to school with me once a week on a Friday, and I was teaching kindergarten at the time. And there were many kids that were frightened by dogs or that were a little apprehensive. And I remember I had a young boy and he would say that he didn't think Rosie was going to like him. And I said, well, why don't you think Rosie would like you? And he said, I just don't think she will. And do you know, the very next day when we were doing morning meeting, they were all sitting around and she landed on his lap. All out of all the
Wow.
22 students sitting around the circle, she went right to him. And right then I said, okay, she's special. She knows those people that, really need her help. And then a few years ago, she was paralyzed. So after surgery, she was able to walk again. But unfortunately, shockingly, they would not reinstate her as a therapy dog because she was in diapers. So I still don't really understand why that had happened, but I had to come up with a new way of giving back. What was I going to do now if I couldn't have her visit? And oddly enough, I've always wanted to be a children's author with ever not really knowing what my children's book was going to be about. And then Rosie came into my life, and that was where I got the idea to give back with the sales of a children's book written from a dog's perspective.
So tell us a little bit about that book and how Rosie impacted children and other people that have come into her life.
Anybody that knows Rosie always said Rosie is a human with fur. She's actually human. And it's so funny. And everybody says that it's through her eyes that you could just see to her soul. And that was what was so important to me when we created the character of Rosie in the book, were her eyes. And everybody just knows, they're like, wow, she's so special through her eyes. So the book starts out, it kind of is kind of like my road with cancer. So your darkest times lead you to your brightest ones. So I decided for Rosie to tell her perspective of her living on the streets in California and how hard it was for her. At the same time that I was in New Jersey, she was in California, both going through our darkest times in life. And only when we met each other did we realize that your toughest roads can lead you to your brightest ones. And then from there, together, we've been told actually, from what we went through, we each had a missing piece of ourselves. And when we came together, whew, it became a whole.
Wow, that is so beautiful. Oh my goodness. Well, we see that she has impacted your life, and I'm sure she's impacted the lives of so many people. So what advice do you give or do you have for families who are going through something unfathomable like cancer or any other type of illness? What do you suggest? And is there anything you wish you had known before you were going through it?
People often say, and I think back to it now 10 years ago, what do? You hear you have cancer, you have this diagnosis, and you don't know what to do. What's the first step? Doctors and all these things, and your mind is just racing. So I wish I had known that there are so much support within your own support system. Like you realize that the people in your lives have such an impact on you and are really there for you, but you don't realize how much until you actually go through it. And so a lot of people are very hesitant to share their story or don't want help. And I wish I would have known to really let them in the beginning, like, come help me. Oh, you had cancer? Please tell me what it's like. Even if your experience is different or different treatment, you had chemo, you had a double mastectomy, just let people in that want to help. Because I find
Mm,
that now that there's a lot of people that instantly get the diagnosis and don't want to talk to me because that's the other thing that I do. Anybody I know or anybody that knows me, I offer to everybody, and I hope somebody from hears this and I can help. I counsel them and talk to them about it. And whether it's chemo, I didn't have chemo, but I watched my husband go through it. I'm very open, double mastectomy, oophorectomy, I had my ovaries removed because I had the BRCA gene. So I lost body parts. There's so many different things that people go through. And to just really know, I didn't know that there were certain groups that will take you for treatments for cancer
mhm.
if you don't have people, to take you or drive you. And all of these wonderful people that volunteer their time to bring you food or help you, there's so many avenues for help that people just don't realize that they have. So I hope that with the diagnosis being so shocking, you can still just remember that there's so much help out there. You just have to look for it. Or I was lucky enough to know certain people that led me in the right direction.
So isolation, I think when people um, are faced with an illness, sometimes they isolate themselves. And what you're saying is don't do that. Seek assistance. Follow, become a part of a group and allow your family to help you because, I always say this. Even a dying man needs help because he needs help being put in the ground. He needs help with the funeral, put in the casket. So if someone who is dead needs help, then you're alive. Don't isolate yourself. And I think that's the message that you're saying. Get there. It doesn't matter where you live either. Seek assistance because in your community, there are people that are there willing to help, and you are one of them. That's why I wanted you on here because I know you have such a great message to give to people.
And I also actually, I was so thankful and lucky that I was given such great advice. Like I was at first, I'm like, wait a second, how am I going to ever be the same, after all these plastic surgeries and these kind of things? And I was told, don't look at tomorrow, look at 4 months, 5 months, 6 months ahead, where you're doing the things that you love to do and you're exercising again and you're doing those kind of things. Like I was given like that kind of take. And I also felt I was never alone in the beginning for like the first few months when, I'd have a visitor and they would leave and somebody else would come. But there's always times, in the evening, in the morning where you are alone. And those are the times where you can let your feelings out. And then during the day, it's almost helpful because you have to be strong for the people that are visiting you and you have to remain positive. But there's always time to feel sorry for yourself. For I would only allow myself maybe 10 minutes a day. Okay, you have 10 minutes to cry. This is happening to you, and now back to business. And this is positive. And I just feel like the more positive you are, the better. And that's what when I bring my book to schools, a lot of the students have said to me after, like, Miss Skala, when I'm challenged or I'm thinking about what I'm going to do, I think about what Rosie would do in this situation. And
Mhm.
so that's how she's come into like helping the children. And that was like remarkable to me to hear that from like a 6-year-old.
I like that. What other? Do you have any stories where children have come to you, including the one you just said, but other stories that you have where Rosie has impacted a child's life or teacher's life, or even your husband? Some other examples as well that our audience can listen to and reflect upon.
I certainly have. From meeting Rosie, in my school, I teach in Sayreville, we had over 100 dogs adopted just from
Mm,
meeting her because Rosie taught so many people that a rescue dog can be just as good as, a dog from a breeder or pet, anything like that. So that was one. There were many students that were afraid of dogs. And I had them like, oh, let's take Rosie for a walk outside. And they were like, okay, building their confidence again and doing it that way. So many parent emails I wish I could share thanking me for bringing Rosie into their lives. They always look forward to Rosie coming on Fridays. And she would walk through the school, no leash, nothing, just walk around and say hi to everybody. And they really enjoyed that. And then throughout my book, after the presentation, I leave the teachers with an extension activity. And one of the extension activities is to gather materials as a school to donate to an animal shelter, Well, I did a Zoom presentation and into a school in California, and they chose to make the donations. And when the teacher went to drop off the donations, what do you think she came home with that day? A
A little
dog.
baby.
So
A little
yeah.
baby.
So she sent
Wow.
Rosie. She sent Rosie a little email thanking her that
Nice.
was adopted because of her.
Nice, nice. Now you mentioned your husband also having some bouts of cancer. So maybe you could talk to spouses who have to be that support to another spouse. Do you have any suggestions you could give them, or what they can, something that worked for you when dealing with your husband and his illness?
I feel like it was hard in the beginning because the moment I hear that somebody has cancer, I fall to my knees crying because I know what you're going through, and you're never the same after you have cancer. Regardless, you are not the same person walking out of that storm that you are when you walk in.
Mm,
Could be in a positive way, hopefully. But I knew that he was going to be changed, and I was also told that you're going to go through whatever you have to go through, treatment or surgeries or whatever you have to do, and you just kind of go through it and you go through the motions. And then when you're finished with it, that's when it hits you. And that is when you just sit back and kind of take in everything that's happened to you and process it and actually react at that moment. So I knew going in what he was going to be going through, which made it even more difficult for me myself. So watching him go through his cancer with the chemo and everything was harder than going through it myself to watch him. But just be very supportive,
mm,
offer different things because like with his treatment, he would only eat certain foods and certain things like that. So it was always trying different things and just always being positive and always, saying you're closer to the end. With every treatment, it's one less you have to do and you're closer to it. And he's a very positive person as well. And he was a great person for me to go through mine with, and I felt like I had to give it back. So what I could say to everybody else is it's extremely difficult watching anyone you love go through anything even remotely like that. For me, it was different because he owns a business and never missed a day of work. So he would go for chemo in the morning, get sick on the turnpike, and work 12 hours. So it was remarkable. But I just think, the more positive people around you, the better. And don't think that you have to do it alone. That's the other thing.
mhm.
Have support. Let your friends come in and help him as well. Take the breaks when you need to take the breaks. Sometimes mentally you just need a break, or you might get upset at some point and need a moment to breathe. And so let the people in to help you.
Give me something about Rosie that you would want the world, when they think about Rosie, give us one word about her, or maybe a sentence about Rosie.
Ooh, she changed my life. She's life
Mm,
changing to every person that meets her. And I see it everywhere we go. She has a stroller and we go into town. I'm lucky enough to live by the stores and they just can't wait to see her. And they all have treats for her. And the bank knows her and everybody at school knows her. And I just feel like
Community Rosie.
from the moment I met her, I knew that we were meant to work together and change lives. And she truly has changed lives.
Wonderful. All right. As a teacher, do you have any insight for other teachers or parents to help kids deal with difficult times or overwhelming obstacles in their life? Do you have any suggestions for them?
I feel like there's many support groups out there if you just do the research. Many support groups out there. There's self-help books, there's children's books to help them and share your hard times. We're human too. I share that with my students every day. I'll say different things that I went through and I came from a divorced family, and so I talk a lot about that with the kids, and I relate a lot of my own life and my own hardships when helping them because I feel like when they see somebody as a teacher or a role model that went through it and they're okay, they're going to be okay also. And I also talk a lot about just it's so much better to stay positive all the time. It takes too much effort to be sad and miserable and, just negative about everything. It takes so much energy, and your outcome, although you can't change it, it just helps so much more to just have a positive attitude going forward with anything that you really, your struggles.
I can definitely, agree with that because you're right. It takes so much energy to be sad. It takes so much. It's so much. So many muscles you use in your face when you change from a frown to a smile or whatever. So, but your mindset is important. Having that positive mindset controls oftentimes controls your what you do and your attitude towards things. And the one thing, if I had to say to anyone, don't do it by yourself. We were meant to help others and allow others to help us. That's so important, especially family, friends. Don't isolate yourself. Seek help when needed. And guess what? There's a hug for you. There's a hug for me. There's a hug for everyone. Take it. Take it. Take it. Don't push it away because we all need someone. We all do.
That's
So I thank
right.
you.
That's what your friends do. They're really there. I think it's more not so much as an isolation from myself. It was more of I didn't want to burden anybody. I didn't want
Mm,
anybody, I wanted to be independent. I can make my own coffee in the morning or, these things that I just didn't want to burden anyone. And then, going through it with my husband and watching it, and the same thing, like, no, it's not, it's not a burden. People want to help you. People
mhm,
want to be
mhm,
there, and it
mhm.
really does help. And it really is all in your attitude. So anytime I have a negative thought or I had a negative thought, I would just, turn it to a positive immediately. No, I'm not allowing myself even like one moment to focus on the negative. And I think that, talking about it and sharing my book, it really does come alive. The power of positivity is what and I say to the kids all the time, had Rosie given up on the streets, maybe we would have never met. Had I given up when I had cancer, maybe I wouldn't, be here as well. And so it's just so important, the power of just being positive, and people are saying like, are you sad that you had cancer? Well, no, because I wouldn't have had Rosie and I wouldn't have written a book and I wouldn't, be able to give back to all of these people. And I think I said it before, I've met angels from doing what I'm doing. And I really feel like they're just coming into my life for a reason.
Well, I thank you. I thank you for your time. I thank you for speaking to us. This was great. I'm happy. I'm very happy you came on to share your story with us, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Lori, for coming on here and sharing your heart, sharing your journey, sharing Rosie with us. I think this is going to be very valuable to a lot of people, especially with they call it the epidemic of loneliness right now. So even people who may not be dealing with something huge like cancer or, something big, it could be something really small, and people are struggling with these small things and they're like too afraid to reach out. We've isolated
Mhm.
ourselves so much. And I think this is something that so many people need to hear, including myself.
Mhm.
It's just something that we can all work on, is just letting other people help us. And
Yeah. You know what, Sarah? I think sometimes we're raised, oh, you could do it on your own. You
yeah,
don't need anyone. Do it by yourself. But we should change that. No,
totally.
get help. If you need it,
Yeah.
get it. It's
So
And
okay.
it,
It's fine to
and
have help.
And it's so life changing too, because people say, like, what do you remember? Because honestly, it was 10 years ago. There's very little that I remember, but I remember every person that was with me. And I would also say, if I may, I journaled. I had a friend who gave me a journal, and I thought, what is this? And she said, oh, you're going to want a journal. And I thought, I'm going to want to journal the worst part of my entire life. Well, let me tell you, that was huge. So that is another thing
Mhm.
that I could say. Anybody going through
Yeah.
a hard time, journaling helped me tremendously. I would do it in the evening when I was by myself, and I would think, and I wrote, who was there, what we did, how I felt at the time, the struggles that I was feeling, but also, the so much of the positivity. Journaling was a huge thing for me. Sorry, I forgot to mention that.
No, that is huge. I mean, journaling is a way to release things, even if you're
Mhm.
not writing to anyone, even if you never read it again. I've heard that, and I think that's a great tip. to people
And
as
it's
well.
also a great tool to look back, not now, but look back like 2 months from what you're going through, look back and say, "Wow, look how far I've come to,
Mhm.
where I was 2 months ago," or, look, and then you'll know when it's time to stop journaling, but it was really therapeutic for me.
Beautiful.
Love that. Okay. So where can people connect with you and just let people know if they want to work with you, have you come speak at a school? What do you have available?
Thank you for asking. So you can only get your books through my books through myself, because I donate all of the profits or the proceeds solely through me on a Google link. I'm looking for over 1,000 followers at Story Lori Books on Instagram and Facebook. And right there, they can DM me as far as information for author visits. I'm looking to get into every school in New Jersey for my presentations, which are phenomenal. I have a presentation for kindergarten and first grade, and then a second presentation for second grade and older. Talk about the writing process and things like that. I read some of my book, show real pictures. It's a phenomenal presentation. I had a lot of help with that as well. Again, reach out to others. And again, I'm Story Lori Books on Instagram and Facebook, and I would love to come visit the schools, hear from you. That's my email as well, storyloribooks@gmail.com. And then if you follow me on the Instagram, the Google link for my book is right there as well.
Wonderful.
Beautiful.
People reach out and get her in your school.
Mhm, mhm.
um,
Yes, please.
Yes. So the last thing that we do for every podcast, and I know you've already given us some really great tips. So if you want to reiterate some of those, that's fine. Or if you have something new, can you just give us 1 to 3 action items or takeaways that parents and teachers can do this week to maybe equip their kids for tough times or themselves? And also maybe recommend how families can get involved with rescue organizations, even if they can't rescue a pup. Like, what would you recommend for that?
Oh, I love that. I'm hoping that many people can volunteer their time at animal rescues, or if they can't actually rescue one, maybe, have some time set aside where you can donate, even if it's not monetary, if you could just donate a blanket or anything like that,
Mhm.
and teach your children how important it is to give back. Like, hey, this blanket would be great maybe for, a dog in a shelter that doesn't have a blanket or a toy. I just like to turn my positivity to everybody else. And I also try to really weigh, and I tell my students, my second graders, they'll come to me with a problem and I'll say, now, is that a big problem or is that a small problem?
Mm.
And, to really understand the difference between a small problem, somebody took your pencil, versus a big problem. So just stop and think and, how can I handle this in a positive way?
That's great. That's really great advice. I love it.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for coming on, Lori. We really appreciate your time.
So much for
Yeah,
having
thank you.
Thanks for listening. Head over to msquarebooks.com where you can find all the latest books and hear about upcoming events like live readings. See you next time.